turn that into the fact where the victim is now the perpetrator and the perpetrator is now the victim. And that just drives me crazy.
Hello everyone, I'm Doshon Farad. Welcome to 30 Frames a Second. I'm standing in today for Nat Wood. Roy Paul has been politically commentating for quite some time. In 2006, at the tender age of 19, he was elected to the Middletown, New York School Board of Education. Since that time, he has been hosting TV and radio. He has also been moderating many events surrounding many political and social issues. He has also appeared on several shows giving his commentary. He's also appeared on this show in the past. Today we'll be speaking with him about a May 1st mayoral debate right here in New York City that he'll be moderating. We'll also be getting his opinions concerning the issues of the day. How are you doing, Roy? Welcome to the show.
I am so happy to be with you.
Well, listen, you and I have spoken before about several issues, okay? I guess the main issue that people are thinking about now, since this is the mayoral race time here in New York City, how do you respond to the State Senator Malcolm Smith situation, who was arrested last week?
You know, it's a very unfortunate situation because you elect people to office and you hope and pray that they're good, kind-hearted, decent people who just want to do the public some good. A lot of people were saying, well, why on earth would someone like Malcolm Smith do something like this? He wanted to get on the Republican line. He's a Democrat. He had no real shot of becoming mayor. But unfortunately, because of the culture of corruption that we have seen in the past few weeks, the answer is clear, and that's all about money. There are too many people who want to get involved in politics because they can see where they can make some green instead of helping people. In this case, when I talk about money in this election, when it pertains to Malcolm Smith, that is the consultant fees, the kickbacks that you get when you employ your friends to do certain political operative type jobs, whether it's on the front end or the back end. If you have a consultant come in working for you, we all know that there are a lot of politicians, not all of them, of course, who hire family member or close friends. You can give a contract to do the printing, you can give a contract to do, you know, spokesperson work, and all of that stuff generates a lot of money, especially when it comes to political contributions. So it's an unfortunate situation. I hate to say that I'm surprised, but you know, when you've been talking about politics as long as I have, as long as we have, we're very seldom surprised about corruption going on in our electoral process.
I wanted to say briefly, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, later on we'll be taking your phone calls if you would like to speak with our guests. How would you describe this year's mayoral race? Is it going to be nasty?
I think it's already gotten nasty. We've seen that with the attack ad that came out against Christine Quinn with this group, Anybody But Quinn. It's going to be really fascinating because a lot of people are predicting that this is going to be the first time where we get a Democratic mayor in some 12 years. It will be interesting to see if that happens. Very little doubt that that will, by the way. So all eyes are really on the Democratic candidates, in my opinion. On the Democratic field, it really depends on what your core issues are with respect to who you will support. If you didn't mind the fact that term limits were extended, Christine Quinn may be your girl. If that was an issue for you, then you might go on to someone like Bill de Blasio or Bill Thompson. Bill Thompson is interesting because he came in a hair-boy's chance last time of winning. Mayor Bloomberg spent over $100 million, and Bill Thompson got within, I think, 5 percentage points from him. So it's going to be really interesting. I wouldn't count anyone out at this point. I think is anyone's race. I don't necessarily believe that Christine Quinn is the far front runner by some, you know, double-digit percentage points. I wouldn't say that either. I think it's too early to tell, but I think anyone can win this election on the Democratic side.
Now, concerning Speaker Quinn, 2 weeks ago there was an article in one of the New York newspapers, I believe it was the New York Times or the Daily News, that spoke about her alleged temperament. They said that she had temper tantrums, went into rages. Do you think that was the beginning of attack ads against her from the other side?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, believe that story was planted. You know, Christine Quinn didn't wake up one day and tell her PR consultant, go and tell the New York Times that I have a bad temper. You know, that wasn't her objective. So that was definitely a story that was fed, and it was fueled by some truth admittedly by Christine Quinn herself, who admits that she has a bad temper. So it didn't help that, you know, her public testimony against her own temper problems worked against her. The question is whether or not the voters care about an elected official who has a bad temper, to the point where so far we have not seen any charges filed. No one has claimed that she harassed them. I mean, there hasn't been any sort of legal backlash from her temper problem. But certainly everyone has a temper. You know, that's something that we've seen, especially with leaders who are considered to be strong leaders. You have to be fierce, you have to be strong and go out there and get what you want. And some people on the constituent end like that because you get results. Some people care about how you get the results, and some people just care that you got the results. And so the question is going to be whether or not people care how she gets her results. If they see her as a success, they might not care that she, you know, twists a few arms to get there.
Now, this debate that you're holding with the mayoral candidates, as a possible topic, will you all be asking, or you're moderating it, will you be asking any of the candidates about stop and frisk and police brutality, which many African American and Latino New Yorkers are very concerned about?
Yeah, I don't think you can have any debate for the mayoral race coming up without talking about those issues, all of the above. So yes, we will be talking about that. The way that this moderation is structured, and it's so critically important, that's why I was very happy that they asked me to do it, it's geared towards the millennial generation, the 18 to 39-year-old base. And there's going to be a lot of first-time voters who are going to be voting for the first time for mayor in the audience asking questions. This is going to be new. There's going to be a lot of high school Democratic students who are going to be there asking questions. That's also new. This is the first time in this election season where there's going to be a debate geared specifically towards the youth vote. There are going to be people in the audience asking questions. We have Sean Bell's mother, who's going to be asking a question about gun violence, and we will get into stop and frisk and all the other issues that are pertaining to the election this year. But the Democratic candidates who are going to be there, and we've invited all of them. Christine Quinn is the only one that has, as of now, decided that she's not going to attend. But all the other candidates have been pretty much put on notice that all of these questions are going to be put on the table. And also because it's me moderating this discussion, I have to sort of infuse a little bit of my personality into it. So I'm going to be asking them some off-the-cuff questions, sort of like a pop culture round, if you will. I'm a commentator now with Rap Genius, which I'm really happy about, so I have to quiz them on probably some hip-hop trivia, I don't know. We'll see how much the candidates know about other things besides politics. And so this is an opportunity where everyone wins, because the people who are going to be in the audience are going to have the opportunity to hear from these people firsthand about what their vision is for New York City going forward for the next 4 years if they get elected. And then for the candidates, they get to display themselves in a very laid-back atmosphere. I'm going to try and infuse as much sense of humor as possible without embarrassing myself and my family. So it's going to be interesting, but they can't lose in a situation like this. So we've encouraged all of them to come, and so far everyone but Quinn has.
Now, you mentioned the 18 to 39-year-old generation. The first presidential debate, President Barack Obama, they said it drew out unprecedented numbers of young people in a long time in the age range that you specified. It seems that that number has since decreased. What is it about politics, not just in New York, but specifically across the country, that has many young people in the age range that you specified very iffy about it, very standoffish when it comes to politics?
Well, I think it's a number of things. I don't think anything dealing with politics is a one-answered question. But I would tell you that the corruption that we've seen is disappointing for young people in particular, but everyone who's in the voting bloc that they're in. And I will also say that the economy is very hard to please, especially for young people. I just wrote an op-ed for Rap Genius, and I talked about the age of independence getting older. Whereas, you know, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, you can get a job, get a decent paying job, and you can go on and be successful in your career. Nowadays, people in my generation have a very difficult time getting employment. Couple that with the fact that we've also talked about the achievement gap without talking about the opportunity gap. When I was on the Board of Education, we spent 5 years talking about the achievement gap. There were white students who were performing better than black students. When we get to a point in our society where black students start performing comparable, if not more, than white students, they're going to be competing for the same opportunities in the workforce. No one talks about that. So I always like to engage conversations about how do we create more opportunities, and in this economy, we're going to probably have to move to more, well, not probably, we are going to have to move to more entrepreneurial ways of thinking in terms of making money, especially if you want to get into our business like media and journalism. There are very few opportunities out there for people who want to make a decent living, and in Manhattan in particular, if that's where you choose to live, I can tell you that when I was looking for my apartment, I needed to make 40 times the rent a year in order to qualify. I wasn't making it at the time. I had a co-signer, but a lot of young people don't. And if you get a job that pays $30,000, that's not going to cut it in most economies. So when young people have to go to the polls and they have to be engaged in the process, they're going to ask the question, what is government doing for me? What has made my life so much better that is going to propel me to get out of my seat and go vote? I don't agree with that way of thinking, but it's a legitimate factor considering you've gone to school, in many cases. In some cases, you've gotten advanced degrees, and you come out, and a lot of people are handing you internships to graduate students. I was in a graduate program for 2.5 years, and a lot of my friends were interning in some places for more than a semester without the promise of any employment. When you're a graduate student, that's very hard to swallow. When you've got loans up the wazoo, when you've got rent to pay, try to go to a restaurant and get a glass of wine for less than $10, and you're going to be sadly disappointed. So everything costs money. Unless we get ourselves to a point where young people in particular can feel confident about the fact that opportunities will present themselves, there's going to be competition. You have to go into the interview, you have to sell yourself, you have to put your best foot forward. But at the end of the day, if you're spending months, 3 to 6 months on end, interviewing every other week and you can't get an opportunity, that's very disappointing.
Now, you mentioned the economy. It was reported last week by the Department of Labor that last month, only a little over 80,000 jobs were created. And of course, many Republicans are saying to the American people, see, we told you so. Mm-hmm. In this economy, why is it so difficult for jobs to be created, even though the president promised that that wouldn't be the case?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would tell you that in this economy, I'm happy that any job is being created, to be honest with you. $80,000 jobs may not be great, but it's certainly not nothing. We're not losing jobs. I would tell you that I've talked to a lot of economists, and it's pretty clear, I don't think anyone disputes this, that the jobs have to be stimulated from the private sector. Can't be stimulated from the public sector. You can't have a massive amount of jobs come from the public sector. There's just not enough opportunity and financial growth. It has to come from the private sector. And on the private back end, there are a lot of people who are afraid of investing back into the economy. Why? Because everything is very vulnerable at this particular time. You have the stock market doing like this. Every single day, it goes up and down. That's not something that people in the private sector look to and go, let's go hire 100 people. There's a lack of stability in the market. And that's not the fault of anyone in particular besides the greedy people at the top who took way too much when they shouldn't have. There are a lot of people within every industry, by the way, who are at the top and making a lot of money, more than they can probably live with in a lifetime, and the people at the bottom can get their foot in the door. So a large part of this problem that we're finding out ourselves in now with the bust and the financial insolvency that's around the country is the fact that a lot of people got very, very greedy. And so when you have that situation, you have to get back to a place where you can balance out your spreadsheet before you start adding jobs, and we're just not there yet.
What should the next mayor of New York be focused on concerning job growth, specifically as it pertains to many young people who will be looking for work or in need of work this summer?
Partnerships. My specialty outside of journalism is business development, and that's what I've talk about entrepreneurship. I had to start my own business in December of 2012, and that's what I do so that I can pursue journalism. And my specialty is creating partnerships with small to mid-sized businesses so they can increase their opportunity and their financial growth. So if the mayor is going to be successful with creating jobs, he's going to have to create partnerships with private sector opportunities and public sector opportunities to bring them in, whether it's through Whole Foods or the development of chains coming into neighborhoods. I'm not going to single out one or the other. That's all a debate for community boards and elected officials to get behind whether they support a particular chain coming into a community. But when it comes to business development and new development, that's where the jobs are going to be created. Public to private sector partnerships, going to some of these private companies and saying, heck, You've got X amount of opportunities for people in your company. How about we outsource the ability for you to hire people internally, and let's broaden your horizons a little bit. Too many times you find people hiring from within, and that's good and it's bad. It's good because you've got people who are comfortable who are rising up the ranks, and it's bad because it blocks out people from the outside from getting in.
Well, we want to know from you, which candidate do you feel would have an excellent chance, I should say in your estimation, who has the greater chance of actually promoting job growth and actually doing job growth in New York City?
You want to get me in trouble. That's what you want me to do. Yeah. You know, I may not be able to be the moderator for that debate on May 1st if I answer that question. They might say, we object to Mr. Paul, who's clearly biased. I would say that without naming anyone in particular, we're going to definitely need someone who has experience in the finance sector and creating jobs. I do tend to get weary of elected officials who are career politicians. I don't think anyone on the Democratic side is a career politician. They certainly haven't been elected as long as we can remember them to. So if you want to get someone who can have experience in generating the economy, I would say you might want to look to someone with a strong finance background, or at least has an idea that's coherent about how to create jobs. I'm not a big stickler for someone, you know, coming in with a PhD in economics to tell me how to stimulate jobs. If you have a clear, coherent plan that after I listen to it, it makes sense, and the math adds up, that's a good possibility for a candidate. But I would say, moreover, we need a candidate who can actually relate to the needs of average Americans. And in this city of 8+ million people, a vast majority of them are not wealthy. They're making between $30,000 and $40,000 a year. And as families, less than that. So, you know, we have to get a mayor who understands the needs of average people. I'm not saying get a poor mayor. I'm not saying we can't get someone who's not successful. But I think we need to get someone who definitely within their background has had some experience dealing with the needs of people. I remember there was a race in Massachusetts, and there was a candidate running for the U.S. Senate who would not go out into the field in the projects and in the poor neighborhoods and shake the hands of the residents. We need a mayor who's okay with doing that. Not just showing up when there's time to give a press conference, but showing up because they actually care about the needs of the community. They want to talk to you. They want to shake your hand. They want to understand what you're going through. We need a mayor that's empathetic and sympathetic to the needs of the average Americans who live in the city. And I think at the core, if we can find that, that's a good common ground to then build upon when it comes to unionized workers needing fair and equitable employment, when it comes to teachers needing the qualities and the supplies and the equipment to be excellent teachers in the work. All of that will fall into line when we have a mayor who understands what it means and feels like to be on the lower income stratus of the community.
Okay, now concerning, it seems that that Speaker Quinn seems to be promoting, I don't want to say promoting, but it seems that she's the most controversial candidate at this point. Why all the controversy surrounding Ms. Quinn?
Oh, because right now she's leading in the polls. I don't know if that will hold up. Actually, if history is any indicator of anything, she probably won't maintain that high lead. I think she was at 38%, if I'm not mistaken, and you need 40% to avoid a runoff. She may stay at the 38, she may go over the 40, she may drop. You know, I have no idea what will happen in the polls, but I will tell you that whenever you're in any race, if there is a perceived front runner, then you have to expect that the target is going to be on you. You know, let's pin the donkey, you know, remember that game? You know, someone has to be pinned, and at a field of the candidates that are running, if John Liu was the front runner, then they would all be attacking John Liu. It's, you know, there really is no respective person here, and it's not personal, it's political. You know, you have candidates who are running against you who want to win.
Now, what are your thoughts concerning, and I'm not at all asking you to endorse or denounce.
Yes, you are.
You mentioned John Liu. Do you feel that he's done an excellent job at the current post that he maintains now?
Well, he hasn't been arrested. I mean, you know, we haven't seen him, you know, in front of the New York Times with handcuffs. You know, the FBI has not picked him up. So by that standard, I think any elected official who is doing their job and can do it without the stain and the tarnish of scandal is doing better than a lot of other politicians who can't avoid arrest. You know, I haven't heard any stories of any illegitimate children. You know, I don't think he is abusive to his wife. You know, there's no public reports of that. And I'm being facetious, of course, I'm joking with you. But I think, you know, the threshold, and going back to the cynicism in politics, the threshold for being a success is not that very high. So, you know, a lot of people will say, you know, had they done a good job? And I go, well, you know, where's the scandal of it? Show me that, and then I'll answer the question. But as far as I'm concerned, with respect to John Liu, and I don't want to single him out, but he's definitely been proactive in using the press. That's one of his strengths. He has done the, you know, he's very good with Chuck Schumer and the whole Sunday night press conference that they do. And when it comes to informing the community on issues, as all the other candidates are when it comes to social media and press conferences, they do the best that they can with the resources they have to educate. And that's what I would tell you on all the candidates that I've seen personally. I don't think any of them has sort of dimmed out in the background and not willing to come forward and tell you when they're not happy with even Mayor Bloomberg on different policy initiatives. So I would say when it comes to their public presence, everyone on the Democratic side at least certainly has an air of visibility about them. It's a matter of policy, where they stand on the issues and how the voters perceive where they are. And I think term limits, a lot of people don't think that's going to be an issue. It's going to be a major issue because there are a lot of people who are still fed up about the overturning of term limits, because a lot of those people who are fed up voted for term limits.
Now,
did
Ms. Quinn, did she support the overturning of term limits?
Yeah, she did, and you know, she has her defense publicly about it. I don't know if that defense has met the standard that a lot of people would like, but if you remember, Bill Thompson was against extension, of term limits, and that was almost the deciding reason for his what a lot of people saw as his defeat of Mayor Bloomberg. Because of that one issue, almost took down the whole entire campaign of Bloomberg.
Hold on, do we have a phone call? Thought we had a phone call. I'm very sorry. Yes, so let us continue. This past week, Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network had hosted their 14th annual convention. Now, among the things that were discussed were the New York mayoral race, and they were discussing term limits. Have you extended an invitation to the National Action Network for May 1st debate?
Oh, you know, I'm not one of the organizers of the debate. I have the easy job of showing up and trying to make people laugh and feel comfortable, and then everyone goes home. And hopefully they think I did a good job moderating it. So I wasn't in charge of putting it together and asking people to come. I don't know if National Action Network is a co-sponsor or has been asked to speak. It's not a bad idea, I don't know.
Now, one of the reasons why I mentioned the National Action Network is I covered last week's convention. And what I noticed was the tremendous amount of young people, as you would say, the 18 to 39-year-olds.
Really?
Do you feel that many African-American civil rights organizations are out of touch with young people?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I would say they need to be more infiltrated with young people. I wouldn't say they're out of touch. I think what a lot of people perceive as being out of touch, others perceive as not necessarily being in touch. I think you have to look at the organizational structure from who's in it, and that will tell you if they're out of touch. So I would say that when it comes to the NAACP and the Urban League and some of those other groups, I think to the extent that they can, they try to open it up a little bit. But you do have some of the people who have been inside the organizational structure for a very long time, who know how things operate and understand how power is perceived through that organization, and they want to hold on to that power. And they do that by having people that they can trust in certain positions, especially when it comes to votes. If you have a national board like the NAACP does, and you have delegates who are elected to go to a convention and vote on policies affecting the NAACP, many times you want those people around you who you can trust in key positions so you can ensure victory in the votes that you want. So young people aren't necessarily seen as those that older people can trust, bringing them into an organization like the NAACP or the Urban League. But it definitely needs to happen, because we do have a presence and a voice and an opinion that can help shape the issues that are on the table for discussion. And unless you're one of the people sitting there, it's very difficult. I know when I was on the Board of Ed and I was one of 9, I got emails and phone calls from constituents and community groups, and they wanted an issue discussed, not necessarily to be voted on, they just wanted it to be brought up at the table. And because I was there, I can say, hey, let's talk about X, Y, and Z. Now, many times there are others who didn't want to talk about these issues, and that's a whole other story. But being a part of the process in a voting capacity, which is where I think a lot of young people ought to be, and they need to be fighting to be in the voting position, because that's where you have the power in any organization. That's where you can make a difference, because as a person who can vote, you may be in a position where you can tip the balance one way or the other at some point, and someone will need you. So you are more respected than someone who doesn't have a vote. So that was always my advice to young people. I was at a conference the other week, and they said, what is your advice to young people who want to get involved in organizational structures? I think young professional groups are great. I'm a member of a few young professional groups. I have nothing against them. But I think to the extent that you can, and the platform exists to be a voting member of an organization, that's where you want the seat, because that's where you're going to have the most say.
Are we ready to go to the phone lines? Do we have a phone call? Oh, sorry about that. We haven't put the number up yet. What I want to ask you, Roy, this past Sunday, Reverend Sharpton had responded very passionately on Roland Martin's show for criticism that people have given him concerning his access to President Obama. Many people, African Americans as well as non-African Americans. Should Reverend Sharpton, or should he not, should Reverend Sharpton be advising our president?
I think anyone who has the access to advise the president should, because it gives the president an opportunity to hear from as many different constituencies as possible. And look, whether you like Reverend Sharpton or you don't, he does have a following and a base. If you look on his Facebook page, he can post something as insular as, I'll be on the air at 6 p.m., and you get hundreds if not thousands of likes. He has a following. People listen to what he has to say. And there are many times when a lot of people feel like he gets it right. So if he can be a voice who can represent his following to the president, who may not necessarily have access to the president, then I think that's all great. Now, we know that there are a constituency group within Reverend Sharpton's base who are displeased with the president. He can share those concerns with the President of the United States. So, yes, to anyone who can have the ear of the president, heck, if I can have the ear of the president, I would talk to him.
So what do you think, then, is behind so much concern, so much controversy concerning his closeness to our president?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the evolution of Reverend Al Sharpton. You know, when you remember back in the Tawana Brawley days, people had very little to do with Al Sharpton. You know, he was seen as someone of a rabble-rouser and someone who always was the attack dog. He just went on the scene and just started bark, bark, bark. And because of that, a lot of people said, let's distance ourselves. People, especially those who are involved in the political process, tend to have long memories. Those outside of the political process can forget things very, very quickly. And so what you found is that a lot of people who were involved in the process, especially those for a very long time, and notice this is a generational thing, because people within my generation aren't complaining that Reverend Al Sharpton has an ear to the president. And so when you have a lot of people who remember, you know, some of the stigma that's been attached to Reverend Al Sharpton say, the past few decades, a lot of people say he should have nothing to do with talking to President Obama. Why would President Obama want anything to do with someone who is as tarnished as Reverend Al Sharpton? But you have to factor in the fact that Reverend Al Sharpton has had an evolution. He's not the same Al Sharpton he was 20 years ago. And he's definitely rebranded himself and had an opportunity to evolve as a community leader and as a commentator. Heck, he's hosting a show on MSNBC. And so he's been able to reach an outlet and been able to communicate with the new generation of followers who are involved in being a part of the movement. And I don't think that can be discounted.
So then, do you feel then that perhaps Reverend Sharpton may be needed more by President Obama than vice versa?
I wouldn't say that. I think President Obama can stand on his own. I think he has his own base of support without anyone. As a matter of fact, I don't think the president needs anyone attached to him in order to be to do his job effectively. It only helps that he has people like Reverend Al Sharpton and others who are in his corner and support his initiatives.
currently, you said that the mayoral debate you were going to quote hip hop lyrics, if I heard you correctly.
No.
Okay, you said, or actually you mentioned something about hip hop artists. Pardon me, I should say. You mentioned something about hip hop artists.
Yeah.
What role do you feel that rappers and hip hop artists should be playing in electoral politics?
Very good question. I think anyone in the hip hop movement would be offended if I got up and started to spew hip hop lyrics. I mean, it just would not go over very well. But I would tell you that I do appreciate the artists who feel it is their obligation to use their platform to educate people about what's going on. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to write with Rap Genius, because I was not a rapper. If you said to me, Tupac wrote this lyric and said this and said that, I wouldn't know what the heck you were talking about. I apologize. It just wasn't the things that were going on in my house. But I thought if I can give my political opinion on the issues that are going on, and someone reading it as they have, they've got a lot of comments on the stuff that I've written, and people go, hey, I never thought about the sequester. I never thought about the age of independence. Maybe it can help broaden their horizons about the things that they usually talk about within their friends. So I think anytime anyone, it doesn't have to be people from the hip-hop community, it can be people who are actors and actresses. If you can use your platform, as Kerry Washington has done very effectively, and educate people on what's going on, the more people you can bring in to be educated, the less, I think, miseducation you're going to have when it comes to the issues of the day. And the more participation you will have. If Kerry Washington supports President Obama, for example, and a lot of young people who follow her, or people in general who follow her, listen to her say, look, this guy needs your support, maybe they'll get out and vote. And I'm an advocate for more people getting involved in the process, whoever you support.
Well, we want to know now, this year, the event that you're planning on May 1st. First, who is it being organized by?
Yes, young professionals and politically engaged. It is a Facebook community that started after the election. And Muthali, the organizer, said, I'm going to use social media to engage young people. And she actually called me up one day and said, I have this group that I'm trying to start and I need you to invite your friends. So it was really a grassroots movement. And it started out with her as one, and it grew to over 500 young people who consider themselves to be professionals and politically engaged in the process between 18 and 39. And they started to engage within that Facebook forum and group about the issues going on. So what she decided to do was to take that forum and to branch it out so that it's much more of a citywide discussion. And she has gotten every group that you can think of, from the Bronx to Queens to Brooklyn to Manhattan to Staten Island, to be a part of the audience makeup. So it really is going to be a diverse group with organizations that are tied to young people. And they're going to be allotted seats. Those young people will be able to have access to those seats. And then from there, it's going to be opened up to the public for other young people who want to attend. And so I'm just excited that they're doing this, because it's the first one to date and probably the only one, as we know, if history is anything that repeats itself, geared towards the millennial generation when it comes to the debates that are going on for mayor.
Where will the event be held?
CUNY Graduate Center, May 1st from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. As far as we know, David Paterson, the former governor, is going to be giving opening remarks. I have asked Mayor David Dinkins if he would also come, and he is a maybe. So we may just get him. And he's also been I tell you, Mayor Dinkins has also been very supportive of young people being involved in the process. When I talked to him about this, he was all for it, and said if he can be there, he can, as long as he can confirm it within his schedule. And they invited us to go on his radio show tomorrow at WBLS to talk about it.
Now, will the event be live streamed or televised?
You know, it needs to be. I hope it is. And in fact, if it's not going to be live streamed, I will make that note, because that's actually a very good point. If it's not going to be live streamed, I will actually assist with them in being able to do that, because I think it should be live streamed. If that's something that they want to do. You know, because I have organized a lot of events and I've moderated other discussions, I've tried to find the balance with knowing my place. If someone says, hey, Doshon, we want you to moderate this, I try not to take it over. You know? So I'm trying to stay in my lane and support them with whatever they want me to do. But to the extent that I think there's a good idea that they should follow, I will mention it.
How many mayoral candidates this year?
On the Republican side, I believe there are 3 so far. You have the independent Adolfo Carrion, who was going to run on the Republican line, is going to now run as an independent line since he successfully was able to get on the Republican line. And on the Democratic side, you have John Liu, Bill de Blasio, Bill Thompson, Christine Quinn. Help me out. Who else is there on the Democratic side? I should know this, shouldn't I? I think there's 5. I want to say 5. There's a 5th person, I want to say. But there's about 5 candidates running on the Democratic side.
Now, you've actually placed some emphasis on the Democratic candidates. What's your assessment of the Republican side?
Yeah, I don't talk Republicans. I stay away from Republican politics. I have friends who are Republican, and I have some African American friends who are Republican, which is interesting. And they support whoever they support, and they have strong opinions. You know, I typically only follow the Republican candidates as it relates to their involvement in what's being reported in the press. I don't typically, spend a lot of time with going to their websites and talking with their campaign staff and trying to be educated on their positions, because personally, I think that many of the issues that are facing democratic societies, Republicans don't always agree. In fact, they almost never agree. At least not on the basic principles that Democrats do. When it comes to affordable health care, a lot of people say, well, we don't need people to pay for other people's health care. Go and get a job and pay for your own. Or we don't need people on welfare. Welfare allows people to be poor forever, instead of other people on the Democratic side who say, let's give people a helping hand when they need it, as they need it. So, I would tell you that personally, my tolerance has actually grown over the years for Republicans because of some of the friends that I have who are common sense Republicans. A lot of Republicans are not common sense Republicans, and I can't tolerate people who just don't believe in common sense.
What is your assessment on school reform? Should the next mayor be focused on school reform in New York City? I should say, should they be careful in who they pick as a chancellor, because many people are actually dissatisfied with, I believe, Dennis Walcott, is it? The school's chancellor. Did I say his name correctly?
You did.
I'm making sure. Yes, sir.
A lot of people are dissatisfied with him, you said?
Yes, based on what we had saw at the NAND conference last week, you had people in the audience. There was a program a panel dealing with education and school reform, and you had many people that expressed outrage at the chancellor.
Well, to your question about school reform, whether or not it's needed, I don't think there's anyone who, going back to that common sense approach, Democrat or Republican, I don't think there's anybody who has a common sense approach to issues who would tell you that we didn't need school reform. Everybody would tell you we need school reform. I hope that's something everybody can agree on. So yes, we definitely need a chancellor and a position from the mayor with respect to school reform and the necessity to really educate all of the babies, not just some of the kids, but educate everybody involved in the public school process. And I'm not against Republicans or Democrats who want to do that. I think Democrats and Republicans, whenever necessary, to get to the table and find common ground and solutions to our issues, I think that's where we need to be. We've gotten too divisive, especially when it comes to education. A lot of people have very differing views on how we get to education reform. And it's a multifaceted process, again, because there are a lot of people and a lot of stakeholders who are affected by one decision that you can make. And so we definitely need to open up the conversation about what it means to have access to quality education, what it means to have access to the choice of the school for your education. I represented a district that neighbored a lot of affluent districts, and a lot of those kids had choices of where they went. A lot of kids in New York City public schools don't have choice. And I would tell you that if you have the ability to have access to quality education, choice in the process, all of those things needs to be a part of the conversation of school reform.
I think we do have a phone call now. Yes, put them through. Sir, you're going to have to turn your speaker down somewhat. You have a call for...
It's turned down. It's on mute.
You have a question for... You have you're going to have to turn...
Name? What's his name?
Oh, no, you're fine, sir. Go ahead. What's your name, sir? You have a question for our guest.
Yeah, I have a question for the brother. Like Bill de Blasio, put it this way, what qualities should I look for in these Mario candidates? Because, I know Bill de Blasio seems to wave around the fact that he's in an interracial relationship or marriage. And Quinn, I know she's going to be playing on the fact that she's a lesbian. you know, and the Asian brother and whatnot, I know he's going to be playing on the fact that his parents were supposedly in sweatshops and things like that. And I know in these particular elections, they have a tendency of window dressing as opposed to actually dealing with actual facts and issues that we deal with in the community, such as stop and frisk, rent, and things like that. And unfortunately, to hear that this debate is possibly not going to be live streamed, it seems like if you're not fortunate enough to actually be in attendance, you may not know what's going to actually be said. So what would you suggest that I look for in these candidates besides these little personas that they like to present?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think
excellent question.
well, I would answer it this way. There are issues and then there's pomp and circumstance, and you cannot allow yourself to be dismayed by the pomp and circumstance of a campaign. I would answer that by asking you what issues, and this is rhetorical, of course, you can think about it on your own, but the issues that are important to you. You know, when you walk out of your house, whether it's the community violence or nonviolence that are going on, whether it's the fact that you're finding it difficult to, you know, financially make your ends meet. I would try to identify maybe 1, 2, or 3 issues that are important to you that you're actually facing on a daily basis. And then go to the websites of the candidates and investigate where they stand on making your situation better. So, for example, if you live in public housing, for example, and you realize that there's a lot of crime in public housing, which candidate is going to address or has a plan for eradicating the violence that exists in public housing? Or making public housing more affordable if that's your issue. Whatever the issue is for you. If you have a child who is in the New York City public school system, but when they come home there's no homework and you don't think that they're being educated properly, what are the candidates going to do for that? So once you've identified the issues that you are actually facing, that you're passionate about, I would try to investigate which candidate is going to address that or has a ready-made plan to investigate and address that, and then I think that would help make your decision a little bit easier.
Thank you for calling. Now, you mentioned public housing. At last week's NAND convention, public housing actually was filled to capacity, that workshop.
Wow.
Why is public housing in New York City such an issue, such a severe issue to many voters?
Because of that campaign, the rent is really too damn high. I have a studio apartment in Harlem, and I have nothing negative about Harlem. I love Harlem. I chose to live there, but I pay more for my rent in my studio apartment than my mother pays for her 3-bedroom ranch-style house in Orange County, New York. She has a backyard. She has a full basement, driveway. I have a studio apartment, and I'm paying more than she does. So there's definitely a lack of balance in the housing market, especially as new development starts to seep in. And what a lot of people are concerned with as it pertains to gentrification and overdevelopment is that people are going to eventually be phased out of what is deemed affordable housing, which we know that Mayor Bloomberg said was about $70,000 a year, affordable housing. I don't know that many people making $70,000 a year. So if that's the definition of affordable housing, we're in trouble. So we need to focus the debate around how do we have development, because we can't have boarded up properties all over the city, but how do we rehab and develop properties but make it affordable so that people who have lived in the neighborhood and have endured those communities with the boarded up housing don't have to be pushed out when you fix it up. And that's the problem. So once you figure out that issue, and the candidates may or should have an opinion on that, you know, and I have my own personal political opinion on that, but there needs to be a way of balancing it out so the rent is comparable to what people are actually making.
So does the next mayor have to deal with the issue of gentrification?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everyone has to do, and you're going to be dealing with gentrification for the next decade or more, as long as there's development. Because especially in Harlem on 125th Street, we've seen the kind of development that doesn't even make sense. For example, the Whole Foods that are bringing in, they have a price point at Whole Foods stores that don't mirror Fine Fare, Associated, or some of the other supermarkets that are affordable out there. So if they're moving into if Whole Foods are moving into Harlem, that means they demographically see a shift happening after they move that store there that's going to meet the demand of their supply. And that's scary, because if that development isn't already there when it comes to the consumer base, if it's coming, we're going to be pressed for a lot of raising rent. And the fact that that public housing form was stacked to the max is indicative of that. People are deathly afraid that the next step from moving people out of my studio apartment so that they can't afford what I pay in rent, they're going to go after the public housing and make it so that people can't live in New York City at all. And that's what people are afraid of. How do we make this growth happen in a way that we can all be proud of our communities and the beautification of it, without having to move in communities where you don't want to live in, but you have to because you can't afford it? Or how about getting a studio apartment and having to rent out half your studio apartment because you can't afford the full rent? So all of these things push people to dire straits, and that's what people are afraid of. People aren't afraid of growth. I talk to a lot of people, especially in Harlem. There's a new bistro, cafe, Boulevard Bistro, on 123rd and Lenox, opened up literally right next door to me. I walk past and people love it. I talk to some people standing outside of it. They love the fact that there's new cafes, there's new development. But when you look at the menu on Boulevard Bistro, the dessert is $10. Where on earth will anybody pay $10 for, you know, an apple pie? I mean, it's just absurd that the demand seems to be there, that the owner of the restaurant would say, you know what, I have a new restaurant, I love it, but you know what? Let's pay $10 for apple pie. I mean, it was just absurd to me that I saw that. I have nothing against the restaurant or the cafe opening, and everyone has to make money. I get it. We're in a capitalistic society. But come on. I mean, I can go to the supermarket and get apple pie for like $4, and I can get a whole pie, not just a slice. You know, the fact that the demand is there on their rationale to charge $10 for an apple pie, they must think someone's going to buy that. And if that demand exists in Harlem, that's very scary.
With the shooting of Kamani Gray recently, a few weeks ago, and with last year's shooting of Ramarley Graham, the NYPD has become infamous for reports of alleged police misconduct and police brutality. What do you feel the next mayor should do in regards to cases of reported alleged police brutality and police misconduct?
Yeah, you know, that's a very sensitive subject for me, because Kamani Graham was 16 years old, and Jumani Williams, city council member, represents the area where this happened. And after the fact, he held a rally, if you will, a community meeting at a school to talk about this issue. And they had the district attorney, Charles Hines, show up to talk about it, because a lot of the young people were going out in the community, vandalizing property, attacking people who had nothing to do with this case. And they asked if I would give the keynote address at that event. And I was very touched to do it, because you know, you have to try to reason in some ways and identify with the people that you're talking to whenever you're giving a speech. But I had a very difficult time doing it, because when I was 16 years old, fortunately, I didn't live in a community where there was rampant violence with the police department. And I was trying to identify in some way with the young people who are watching their friends, people that they've grown up with, being attacked by the police, being, in some cases, mistreated by the police. How do you grow up in an environment? Forget not having trust for the police department. It's very difficult to do that when you've got these kind of cases going on. But how do you live and walk out of your house and go to the grocery store and try to live some sort of normalcy within your existence if that's in the back of your mind? I mean, I wouldn't want to walk out of my apartment and me looking over my shoulder to see if there's a police officer who's standing on the corner who may just want to attack me for whatever reason he feels necessary. So it was very difficult, but at the end of the day, communities have to really band together and be stronger within their inner positivity than the negativity that surrounds them. And I think that's the only thing that I could say that to me made any bit of sense, because I can't imagine what they're going through personally. But whatever it is, they can't allow it to destroy their communities. They can't allow their friends to go into supermarkets and grocery stores and pharmacies and attack people who had absolutely nothing to do with this. They can't go in and loot and rob stores for no reason. They can't add to the destruction that's going on. And to the mayor who wants to make sense of all of this, this is why I said to you it was extremely important that we had a mayor who understood the issues and the plights of average people. Because if they did, they would understand the fact that when young people walk out of their houses in communities like this one in that area of Brooklyn, that they are afraid of the police and that they are afraid of being wrongly attacked because it happened before and it happens on a consistent basis. They have to be concerned with the fact that stop and frisk policies may not be perfect, and there needs to be revisions, if not eliminations in all, with the entire policy. You know, there needs to be open to the fact that there are issues that have been in place, that are in place, that may not be working. And there needs to be alternative ways of looking at it. You know, whenever someone says to me, I am the CEO of any entity or corporation, and everything is fine. There is nothing wrong with any policy that I put in place. It is perfect. We're not touching it. Live with it. If I was an employee, I would quit. Because everyone has a policy that is flawed. I've been a part of a legislation on the school board where you look back at it, months go on, and you go, you know what? We can't tweak that. You always have to be open to looking at a policy or an initiative and finding where you can tweak it and make it better. Not make it perfect, but make it better. And any mayor who is interested and willing in doing that and has an eye for what may work, or listens to people, going back to President Obama, who listens to people like Rev Sharpton and others who can help tweak policies to make them better, I'm all for it.
Oh, I believe we have another phone call. Who do we have on the line?
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Because of that, I don't know, young man, is speaking with you. Maybe I misinterpreted him. But I'm 50 years old. I've never seen a time in my life where the police weren't attacking us. To me, it came after the Night Riders, the Ku Klux Klan, and present day to the police. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what community he grew up in, but to me, maybe I understood him. He has a disconnect from our community. Just by those people in their community telling me that he's disconnected himself. So maybe I misinterpreted. If I did, I do apologize. But I don't know what he's talking about. Police have always had problems in our community. And it's not because people are all criminals. It's because of the difference in the way they treat us and people of other neighborhoods per se, the masses. Thank you.
And that's actually what I was going to ask you, Roy. Mm-hmm. How would you respond to people who have said that Mayor Bloomberg has been quite indifferent to the stop and frisk policy and police misconduct, which has disproportionately affected African American Latino men? And of course, Mayor Giuliani before him was accused of the same thing. What is your response to that?
Yeah, to piggyback off the question, I think I was pretty clear in saying that, you know, within communities, especially with this community in Brooklyn with Kamani Gray, that there absolutely were attacks and injustices going on with some of the people there. And we know that because of what was reported and what people talked about that haven't been reported. So I certainly hope I didn't give the impression that, you know, there weren't any injustices in the police department. I don't think that's what I said. But to your point, it piggybacks off my last answer to you, which is that every policy needs to be opened up for review, especially when you have complaints coming in, as we do with stop and frisk, where they say that there's a disproportionate amount of people who are stopped who are never charged. There are disproportionate of people who are stopped who don't have weapons. You know, these are all injustices that exist within the system. So, I'm definitely not an advocate who would say that, leave the stop and frisk policy the way that it is without altering it, or that there is no community that's void of police misconduct. I mean that's not my position at all. I did say that I didn't grow up being attacked by the police, and so I didn't have a direct connection with some of the kids who had, but I do know that it exists. I've seen it happen. I know that it happens. I'm not disputing that it happens, but I definitely think that all of the policies that allow those to happen, some of them internally and externally, all of them need a mayor who has oversight, who is willing to tweak them when necessary, or eliminate them if that's what it calls for.
The mayor, Mayor Bloomberg, had recently appealed the decision of one of the higher courts that knocked down his attempt to ban the soda, the amount of soda you can drink.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was behind Mayor Bloomberg attempting to enact a soda ban?
Well, I think Mayor Bloomberg sees himself as someone who doesn't just deal with policy and legislation and community activism, but sees himself as someone who's much more broader in his scope as the mayor. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I mean, personally, I think there are so many pressing issues going on within the city of New York, with some of the core issues that we've touched about, public housing and education reform and community policing. I think there are so many issues to deal with there that if I was the mayor, I probably wouldn't want to enact a soda ban. I can't say that another mayor doesn't deem it necessary within his role to do it. Personally, I probably would say that if the judge decided that it was not something that was warrant of being enacted, he should probably go along with the decision of the judge. But then again, he has the right to do what he feels that the legal justice system gives him the opportunity to do. So I wouldn't say that I agree with the policy of a soda ban, or even agree with the policy of broadening the scope of the mayor's office to include anything other than some of the core issues that we're dealing with already, because we haven't perfected those. We haven't perfected education reform. We haven't gotten to a point where we've gotten to a comfortable balance with policing and public housing and all those other issues. So there are other issues to deal with that I would deal with if I was the mayor, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're insidious policies.
Well, listen, since we have only about 3 minutes to go.
An hour went that quickly?
Actually, no. What I'm going to ask you, no. Actually, we're going to continue this for a little while. We're going to, what I would like for you to know is actually concerning this policy now. We just spoke about
soda ban.
Yes, a soda ban, okay. Do you honestly feel that Mayor Bloomberg is concerned about the health of Americans, or is he just being, some have said he was just being a tyrant?
No, I definitely think he's concerned about the health of the citizens of New York. I wouldn't paint whether you agree with him or not, I wouldn't paint him as someone who wants to cause harm to people. I mean, I don't think that's his motive. But I definitely think that he has his own approach in doing that. And the controversy is whether or not you agree with his approach. He thinks that he, is making a healthier community by trying to eliminate soda bans or decreasing the size of those that can go out. Do you agree or you disagree, and that's where the issue is? Yes,
sir. Thank you for tuning in. We're getting ready to go off the air. I'm Doshon Farad, standing in for Nat Wood. Thank you for tuning in to 30 Frames a Second. Thank you, Roy Paul, for joining us.
My pleasure.
We wish you luck on May the 1st.
Thanks.
See you next week.